All right, so I'm back from a 2-week vacation, and I'm actually glad to be here in the studio making a new video for you. So I'm gonna start this one by answering this following question that I received while I was on vacation, and this one goes like this. Hello Chris, they always say mix in mono. When setting up a stereo delay, do you listen in mono? That is actually a good question. So I'm gonna take the time to share with you my views on mixing in mono, what mixing in mono is all about. There's a lot of information out there, and it's actually a controversial topic also on YouTube. You know, some will say that mixing in mono is like the key to a great mix, and other engineers are gonna go like, I don't even care about mixing in mono. So we have both sides of the story. So I'm gonna share with you my views, what I do on my side, and some mistake that I'm gonna urge you to stop making if you're mixing in mono. But first, if you wanna speed up your mixing workflow, I'm gonna encourage you to check out my free workshop on how to build the perfect mix template. In this workshop, I explain to you my full process on how I build my own mix template. And if you're a CUBASE user, you can also download for free a mix template session so you can build your own personalized mix template to speed up your workflow. Check it out, the link is down below. Okay, now when it comes to mixing in mono, I'm gonna be straight up with you right away. On my side, I don't mix in mono. I'm gonna check my mixes in mono to make sure that everything sounds okay, but for the most part, I don't mix in mono. The reason is very simple. Most people out there are gonna listen to music in stereo, not in mono. You know, whether you're listening to music in your car, using your headphones, even using your phone. Today's phone, like most of them, will have 2 speakers, you know, like the one that I have here. So very easy to listen to music in stereo, even through a phone. So, you know, there's no reason for me to focus only on a mono mix and make those decisions according to how my mix sounds in mono. Stereo is what it's all about, and music today is meant to be heard in stereo. So all of my energy is going to go according to how my mix sounds in stereo. And panning is part of my mixing process, to pan things around to get a good stereo image when mixing music. With that said, yes, there's some advantages on checking your mixes in mono. Like for example, pointing out polarity and phasing issues. By collapsing everything to mono, that might be easier for you to point out some phasing or polarity issues on your recordings or on a special effect that you're using in your mix. On my side, when it comes to acoustic instrument recording, I'm actually going to fix that up at the beginning of the mix when working on my rough balance mix. You know, so when I import new tracks into my mix template, all of my channels are going to be panned to the center. I'm going to roughly balance all the tracks out and then focus on those instruments that were recorded with several microphones, like an acoustic drum kit, for example. Like a drum kit is recorded with several mics. Within those mics, you can get some phasing or polarity issues. And when everything is panned straight in the center, when you actually basically have a mono mix, it can be easier to point out those polarity issues between the overheads and the snare, overheads and the kick, and so on. So I'm gonna fix that up right away before I start even adding an EQ or a compressor. Same when it comes to an acoustic guitar recording or a guitar amp that was recorded with 2 microphones. I'm gonna make sure that those 2 microphones are panned in the center, and I'm just gonna check if the phase or polarity is okay and sounds good, you know. So by having those signals straight in the center, it will be easier to fix those polarity issues. But again, it's not something that I'm gonna fix near the end of my mix, you know. I'm gonna fix that up right away before I start adding processing on my mix. So that is one aspect where mono can be very useful. There's also when you have like masking problems, when you collapse everything to mono, when you have instruments that are fully panned, that are battling themselves within the same frequency range, when you collapse everything together, you will actually notice that right away. You will have like frequency masking with those instruments. So by having your mix in mono at this point, you'll be able to point out those masking problems and work with EQ to add more separation with those problematic masking instruments. By having your mix in mono, you will need to use something else than panning to add separation between those instruments, and you will have to rely more on equalization to do so, to add separation. That is going to actually force your ears to focus more on the frequency bands and frequencies all around, just to add more separation on tracks that are actually creating some frequency masking. However, panning is an amazing and creative tool to add separation in my mix. So it's one thing to add separation with frequencies, and it's something else also to add a separation by using panning. On my end, I've been mixing for years and I'm used to mixing stereo, so I'm able to point out those masking problems even if I'm mixing in stereo. But I'm gonna have to say that that can be a very good exercise for ear development and ear training when it comes to add separation using frequencies. So it might be worth checking out. When it comes to the biggest mistake that people do when mixing in mono, that is very simple. People tend to put a lot of focus on how their mix is balanced in mono, and that is like a huge mistake, you know. So they actually switch from stereo to mono, and then they're gonna listen to their mix and point out that the left guitar is not as loud as it should be, and they're gonna bring that one up, and same for what is happening on the right side also. So they're gonna bring those tracks up also. The stereo delay that they were using on the vocal, oh, I'm not hearing it enough in mono, so I'm gonna bring that effect up as well. And the problem is when they're gonna get back to listen to their mix in stereo, their mix is going to be unbalanced, you know, and it's not going to sound like it's supposed to sound like. And that is a big problem, something that is super important to realize, because I want to give you a few tips. Now, I'm not against mixing in mono. It's not my workflow, but if this is something that you want to explore, or if this is something that works for you, by all means, do it. You know, if that makes your mixes sound better, don't stop doing it. You know, everyone has its own workflow. But what I want to do is to give you some tips. If you're planning on mixing in mono, or you want to explore mixing in mono, I'm going to give you some pointers, some tips that are going to be very useful. The first one is when you collapse everything to mono, it is normal that some of the channels are going to be louder than others, you know. So everything that is panned to the far left or right are going to sound quieter, okay? And everything that was originally centered, panned in the center, are going to sound way louder, like at around 3 dB or more, depending on the pan law parameters you have in your DAW. So if you take a kick, a snare, a bass, a vocal that is already panned in the center, those instruments and signals are going to sound louder than everything that are panned left and right. And the reason is simple. We have two speakers, okay? So there's some signals coming out of the right and the left speaker. When a signal is coming out equally from the left and the right, it's going to be perceived in the center. So we don't have a center speaker as far as I know. We only have a left and a right. So your vocal, if the vocal is panned right in the center, that only means that the signal is coming out of the left and the right speaker equally. So it's the same equal signal that comes out on both speakers. So that's why it's perceived in the center. So if you're taking a signal and you just pan it to the far left, that only means that you're reducing the level out of the right speaker. So this way you can only hear it on the left side. So when you sum up everything to mono, it's normal that all the signals that are panned are going to sound quieter, opposed to everything that is coming out of both speakers equally. That are centered, like a vocal, a kick, a bass, and so on. So whatever you have centered in your mix are gonna sound a bit louder. So this is very important to know when you mix in mono or checking your mixing mono. You have to realize that all the centered elements are gonna sound louder. So all your effects, like your ping pong delays, for example, or your stereo reverbs, are not gonna sound as present and are not gonna be as noticeable in mono opposed to a stereo mix. Okay, so you don't have to freak out and make the mistake of rebalancing mixing everything so it sounds good in mono, because again, when you're going to get back to stereo, all of your mix is going to be on balance and all those pan elements are going to sound way louder. So when I check my mix in mono, if I have all of my main centered elements present and a bit louder than everything else, I know that my mix is in good shape. That's simple. And something that I think is very important also, if you're planning on mixing in mono or checking your mixing mono, you can also work with your reference mixes that you work with in stereo, but work with them in mono as well. Listen to what they sound like when you switch and you sum everything up to mono, okay? So you'll have an idea on what to listen for when you compare your mono mix to a professional reference mix that you also listen to in mono. So this is again very important in my book. And if you're mixing EDM for clubs and you're concerned about the quality of your mono mix, reference with some EDM music, check what they sound like in mono. So that is going to give you a very good reference point to check your mix in mono, and this way you'll be able to focus on the main elements that you need to focus on and put your energy on when mixing. So this is my take on mixing in mono, and to answer the original question, no, I don't set up my stereo delays in mono. I do everything in stereo and I make all of my main mixing decisions in stereo. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button, and if you're new here on the channel or you're still not subscribed to the channel, please do so. Let's go towards hitting 100,000 subscribers on this channel in the near future, and this is going to be thanks to you. So feel free to share, to like, and to subscribe to this channel. Until next time, take care and see you.